Canada is beset by economic problems everywhere we turn, coming from every single solitary direction, whether it be the tariffs, whether it be the housing crisis, whether it be any of a number of problems. But don't worry about it, everybody. Anita Anand and Melanie Joly are on the case. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name's Sterling. Now, in recent days, Anita Anand has gone over to Britain to talk about probably the same things that Mark Carney went over there to talk about. I don't know why Canada's spending more money on jet fuel and all of the things that go along with that, when Mark Carney was just there and the King was just here and the Prime Minister of England was just in the United States. So I don't know, maybe it's all for show. However, Anita Anand did say that she's going from there right over to France. Again, not sure what the purpose of that is. I suppose it's just so that she can stamp her feet and say, look, I'm the new person in charge of whatever it is that they call her, the foreign affairs minister. That's what I refer to her as. Now, she was asked a bunch of questions by the British press. And there are things that she was asked that, of course, were going to come back and bite her from policies that the Liberal government did like a week or 2 or 3 ago. What I want you to pay attention when she's giving her answer is how she already had the statements pre-prepared, how she has to keep looking down at her paper. Imagine in your mind that you have to go halfway around the world and say a pre-prepared statement that the Liberal government paid consultants with your money to write for them. That's how tenuous and fragile the vocal ability of the Liberal foreign affairs minister is. I mean, you can't be serious. As we get into this, I would encourage you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. It really helps the channel. And if you like the content, give it a thumbs up.
This afternoon, my counterpart here in the UK, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, we had a wonderful conversation. We discussed aid to Ukraine, we discussed our economic and trade relationship, and we discussed defense spending in advance of the NATO summit.
So here's the Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister standing in front of the British press saying, hey, we talked to the Britain and Canada, discussed, trade and Ukraine, and we talked about the upcoming NATO and whether or not we're going to be looking at a 5% increase from the 2%. A lot of topics there that the press could be asking her about.
Shortly after you became the minister, both you and your government issued statements about the situation in Gaza, about the forcible displacement by Israel of Palestinians, about the starvation tactics, according to the United Nations, suggesting that your government was in opposition and would take steps if things didn't change. What's it going to take for things to change, and what steps?
Well, thank you for the question. I want to start by saying that ensuring security in the region requires an immediate return to a ceasefire in Gaza. All remaining hostages must be released, and Hamas can have no future in Gaza. The human suffering across the region is intolerable, as the statements stated. More humanitarian assistance, especially food, must enter Gaza, and Canada will continue to work with our allies to ensure that there is dignity and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. In terms of your specific question, we are looking at a variety of options.
Would you consider recognizing a Palestinian state?
We are committed to achieving a two-state solution with Israelis and Palestinians living in peace and security.
Well, Israel has said they're going to create 22 new illegal settlements in those areas. If you, with respect, don't do it soon, there may not be much land left to recognize.
Canada opposes Israel's approval of 22 new settlements in the West Bank. We call on Israel to reverse this decision.
Yep. They asked about Israel and the Hamas conflict because Mark Carney was foolish enough to put Canada's name on a joint statement from a bunch of people who are politically motivated, who are compromised by money that doesn't come necessarily from let's call it positive sources. This guy cornered and badgered. What I found astounding is that she had prepared answers for it. Like, she's looking down, reading, and you could see her turning the pages to her binder on which was going to be the appropriate answer for which question. We have enough problems, and I am not going to permit and sit idly by while anybody imports foreign wars into my country. There's a line, and we have, as Canadians, an obligation to ourselves to draw that line. So you'd think, okay, you got through that round of questions. That one reporter must clearly have had his own personal motivations and have his own personal ideology that he's trying to shove down the Canadian people and get them to commit to an answer that only he wants to hear. So obviously the next reporter in line will ask a question pertaining to Canada's trade with Britain or any of the questions that she listed. Ukraine, right? The NATO summit. This is an important NATO summit coming up. Obviously, that's going to be something that they're going to be discussing.
And as you may be aware, President Zelensky will be joining Prime Minister Carney at the G7 for one of those days.
On that point, so is Mr. Modi. How do you feel about that?
Well, I want to begin by saying that Canada will never compromise on the rule of law. There is an independent legal process that is continuing. At the same time, the Prime Minister is hosting the G7. He has invited global leaders to discuss pressing global issues. And the upshot is that the long-standing relationship between Canada and India in terms of people-to-people ties and in terms of the commercial relationship will be part of that summit manifested in the invitation to Prime Minister Modi by Prime Minister Carney.
See how she pulled out a different piece of paper and then couldn't even look up. I mean, you don't take the time to just at least like some sort of get your own answer so that you can, look people in the eye when you're looking down at your feet trying to read this document and trying to pretend like you're not reading it.
And India, does this say that Canada is putting commercial priorities above national security?
Not at all. Not one bit. There is an RCMP investigation that is ongoing. There is a legal process that is independent of the Government of Canada, full stop. And we will always respect the rule of law, and we will always respect the legal process that is occurring in our country.
If I may follow on just in terms of the Sikh community in Canada, what message do you think it sends to them that Narendra Modi is coming?
I hope that Canadians across the board will always know that our government stands for and respects the rule of law and legal processes.
Well, I guess we see now why they have to write the answers down for her, because when asked a question that she doesn't already have a pre-approved answer written down for her she stumbles and stutters and it looks like a deer in the headlights. She did get some reprieve, though, because one of the reporters finally asked her a question about the things she mentioned at the very beginning at her opening statement.
Why can Britain score a deal in Canada? Is their approach better or smarter? I mean, they seem to take a more low-key approach and Canada being more aggressive. But why do they do it in Canada?
Actually, we are continuing to have conversations with our American counterparts. I know that Minister LeBlanc in particular has been in Washington, D.C. numerous times over the past number of weeks, and those conversations are ongoing.
How come Britain can do it and Canada can't? What are they doing right that you're not? Did you see the look on her face? She stumbled and stuttered. This woman she's not qualified for this job. I'm sorry, but I get that she's a person who's got a lot of experience in cabinet and has a lot of experience with the Liberal government, but this might be too much for her to handle. I mean, this is the individual who's going to be running around the world trying to smooth over all of our relations. She can't even come up with a straight answer over the fact that Canada and Trump doesn't want anything from Canada. He wanted things from Britain. He doesn't want anything from Canada, and nobody wants to admit it. I'll admit it. It's just the case, just simply the facts. However, Anita Anand is the one that's, running around trying to make this look all smooth, and I am not inspired. Are you feeling inspired? Don't worry, however, domestically, we have Melanie Joly. She's going to be looking after all kinds of the steel problems and the aluminum problems. She's just talking about it the other day. She was in Hamilton mentioning how she's making all of this progress. Well, you'll hear it.
And we want to make sure that they can continue to succeed in their jobs, and we will do everything to make sure that they do.
They will make sure that they will do everything to ensure that the steel workers succeed at their jobs. Excellent. That means that they're going to stop with this horrible green agenda, net zero malarkey. They're going to allow all of the steel to be bought up by the pipeline so that they can build all of the things that they need to get oil up and running and flowing out of this country. We can get it invested in the ports that we're going to get running into the ground. They're going to do everything, which means they're going to drop that net zero. Is that what you think she meant, or do you feel like she just said that without actually meaning it?
They're completely illegal, and they're completely unjustifiable. So we will continue to fight back. And finally, we will build. And you saw the Prime Minister today with key ministers tabling a bill that is fundamental, that is about making sure that we create one Canadian economy. And we will also make sure that we invest in the defense sector by creating a Canada defense industrial sector and creating jobs in the steel aluminum sector through these investments.
No, I did a report on that C5. It's not anything what she just described. It is a complete farce. There's nothing in there that will help build any, and there's more things that can get in the way than can ever get anything developed. What they want you to think is that they're up to something, that they're doing something. Trump signed and began this process in January. We are in June, and the Liberal government has done nothing but table a bill that says maybe if you get on our list, we might be able to build or develop something that's in the national interest. Now, beyond the pipeline, like I asked in that other thing, what in your mind is in the national interest that we need the federal government to stick their nose into? Anybody at all? Because beyond that, everything else is a provincial development and will not in any way, shape, or form assist the nation as a whole. I don't believe that the Liberal government has any intention of completing any of those projects. That legislation reads as something as a stall tactic. But you heard her talk about how she's going to develop the military industrial complex in Canada. Now, the problem, of course, is that it's not about the raw material that we need for the munitions or for anything. It's about the environmental agenda and how the buildings that are required to manufacture these items, whether they be the aluminum cans that the aluminum industry is manufacturing, right? So that's the problem, right? We make it in Canada as the raw material, and they add the value to it in the United States. The value added is in the United States, which of course makes Donald Trump's job a lot easier, because the manufacturing sector is already up and running. It just needs the raw material, and the raw material can be ripped out of the ground in much faster ways than to, say, get a bottling plant or a canning plant or a munitions plant or a rocket, a guided missile plant or any of the things that the Melanie Joly just listed off. And to get those built in Canada, of course, requires a lot of environmental oversight, which is why all of the people that handle that move them down into the United States and simply buy the raw material from Canada. They make it down in the States where they don't have everybody screaming at them because they might have bent a blade of grass. And then they ship it back into Canada where they sell it to the people that have purchased it, who have no other choice because there is no Canadian counterpart. There's nothing about it that's Canadian. And if they were, let's just say for the sake of argument, like I snap my fingers and now there's a bottling plant or a canning factory that's going to allow for all of the Canadian beer bottles or beer manufacturers to buy aluminum from Canadian supplier. Well, the problem, of course, is that it will all be made with green steel and under a green agenda, and the cost will be 3 times as much to buy it from the contract they already laid out with the American guy who can provide it to them at a third of the cost. And you say to yourself, well, that's not right. They should be buying it from Canada. Okay, but be prepared to spend that much more money on your beer, because that's what happens. The company's not going to eat that cost. That's what the situation that we're looking at. And the quickest and fastest way that we can solve this, like Pierre Poilievre tried to tell you, is to get the development, the restrictions and the regulations out of the way. We just got to let people build these things, keep it out of the ground, keep it out of the water, and let's get down to business. Now, I told all of you that there's no way in the world we're going to be able to withstand the United States on a trade war, and we can see the proof of that. These guys are running around promising to look after your anxiety, and Trump's down there giving people decent jobs. And I hear again Donald Trump sitting a foot from Mark Carney saying, never say never.
I think your question is a very good one. So we have a plan for short, medium, and long term. Short term, I was with all the steel CEOs yesterday, including Ron Bedard, who was there, with the Steel Association. We're looking at solutions, and I hope we can announce them very soon to make sure we can provide liquidities to the companies that need them. So that will help protect the jobs, because clearly that's what we want to do.
Of course, now we understand why the government doesn't want to table a budget, because what she just said there was that the government is going to give them corporate welfare, that they're going to bail them out because they can't solve the problem without just throwing inflationary spending at them.
The other thing also we're looking at is how can we make sure that there's no foreign steel coming into Canada?
I know how you can stop foreign steel from coming into Canada. Why don't you do like Donald Trump did and use tariffs? These guys don't have a clue.
We're trying to find ways to make sure we put maximum pressure on the US, while of course knowing that we can negotiate, and that's our strategy.
Of course, when you have a personality like Melanie Joly who thinks that she has an answer for everything, she lets slip the truth when she should be more careful with either what she said in the past or what she's saying right now, because she said there, we are trying to find ways. Not that we have ways, not that we've already developed ways, not that we had a strategy session and figure. We're trying to find a way. Meaning 6 months later, they still haven't got a clue what to do. Oh, yeah, no. Are you feeling inspired?
People are anxious. People need to know that, of course, their government is there for them. But, you know, these can't be only empty promises. We're in action mode. We know that if we don't act quickly, people's livelihoods will be at stake. This is something the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, myself, we take, the entire team take extremely seriously. We know urgency is the matter. We know companies are taking decisions as we speak. And so we, as I said, this is all hands on deck. And that's why we came up with a legislation 1 month after being sworn in. And it's an important bill, and we need to make sure that all parties support the bill.
You saw that woman walk away in the middle of Melanie Joly saying everybody's all hands on deck and we're all working together. I mean, here's a lesson in picking your moment. So she's talking about the unity and everything. That lady that walked away, that waved at everybody and left, was the mayor. Hamilton's mayor. She's like, I got to go. You know, the Liberal MP is standing there and she's surrounded by Liberal MPs. There was 4 Liberal MPs there at this press conference. And she's like, oh, I got to go. See you later. Thanks for stopping by. Come on. Oh, you can't make it up. I mean, it would be a lot funnier if it wasn't actually a testimony to just how poorly things are going to be handled by this and this Liberal government, and how people should have thought their way beyond Donald Trump and looked at the reality of the situation before they cast their vote for a party that is not capable of solving the problem, because they are either ideologically driven or because they don't have any clue on what they're doing.
The federal government has invested in Dofasco projects before, including a green steel project that everyone's very excited about.
Yeah.
Is that, given the current environment, is that still a priority for the
Absolutely,
federal government?
it is. And it is under my watch as Minister of Industry to make sure that that's the case. And we'll work with ArcelorMittal Dofasco to make sure that that happens. Because we think that it's an important project. We think it gives the plant a competitive edge. And that's why we think it's just the right direction. So we're continuing that right direction.
And she finishes up by making my point. He asked her about the green steel, and she, in her mind, thinks that that's going to make them competitive. It's enormously expensive. It drains a lot of power from the system so that it can manufacture steel without burning any coal, because the coal is required to get it up to heat, and the electricity that they use to get it up to heat is extremely draining on the system. It's extremely expensive. And as a result, of course, it's twice as much or 3 times as much on the world market. But somehow she feels that Canadian corporations are going to be able to, let's just leave aside trading it, right? Because it's not going to go anywhere into the United States. And the Japanese are buying their steel from the United States, and Britain is buying their steel from the United States, and India is buying their steel from probably Russia, but maybe from the United States, certainly not Canada. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we have to use that steel domestically. What you want me to believe is that we're going to be able to start a company making, I don't know, lawnmowers. And by purchasing that steel, we are now going to have to add, and utilizing it for lawnmowers, we are now, and the engines that go in the lawnmowers and so on and so forth, we are now going to have to put tariffs on our borders so that anything that comes into Canada that is not manufactured using this very green, very expensive technique can't be sold cheaper than our domestic product. And as a result, Canadians can't buy it, get a deal on anything. We're paying now through the nose as our economy tanks, as our jobs flee the country, as all of the income that we were hoping to rely on and the things that we need to purchase become more and more and more expensive. I suppose lawnmowers is a poor example when you consider that the Liberal government is trying to force us into tiny little cubicles and make us all live in the same 6 buildings. However, leave that aside. Just look at anything, whether we talk about trying to get the car industry up in Canada, we're going to have to buy this more expensive steel, this more expensive aluminum, rather than buy it from somewhere where we can manufacture the product and then give it to us at a less expensive rate or cost to the Canadian person who's already struggling. So we would think that as a Canadian, you'll want to buy the stuff that's least expensive. Of course, she's going to be sticking by this green ideology like I was been trying to convince you of for the whole time. And to solve that problem, what they plan on doing is putting a tariff up. So they are, in fact, doing exactly what they're accusing Donald Trump of doing, except for when, just like anything that comes out of this Liberal government, from my experience, they practice not what they preach. And so when they say, it has to be done a certain way, so we're going to be putting tariffs on it, and then as soon as Donald Trump does it, it's an attack, it's an attack, it's an attack. So the second that you put a tariff on the United States for importing any of the less expensive steel, he's simply going to say that it's an attack on the United States. Just like he does when you put the softwood lumber down in there, he calls it dumping. Well, you're going to be saying the same thing. So this Liberal government is so inept at keeping track of what it said just 5 minutes ago, and how it can't necessarily put itself in the other person's shoes. Without doing that, you're not going to find any kind of reason. You're not going to be able to find any sort of common ground if you can't understand what the other country is going through. So on the one hand, Donald Trump says, I want my steel to be made domestically, and I'm going to put on tariffs to make sure that happens. But when that happens to Canada, the Liberal government screams foul. And yet when they talk about it, they're going to be sticking behind 100% all of these green agenda that they've already put forward, and to ensure that they can keep their own domestic market green the way that they want it, the way that they feel that the whole wide world is doing, even though we are the only country in the world doing it. They're going to put on tariffs on our border to stop any of the product coming in from different countries. And you then become Donald Trump. You actually become any of the countries that add extensive tariffs, whether that be Vietnam, whether that be China, Japan, India, Australia, Britain. It doesn't matter what country it is. You are now the same. You should, on the one hand, understand where they're coming from and stop screaming that it's some kind of a war, because it's not a war. It's nothing that you wouldn't do. And on the other hand, you should appreciate that those economies are up and running because they for the one reason they are not sticking to this agenda of green that does not work. It harms the economy. It doesn't strengthen the economy. There is no jobs. If there were jobs being manufactured from this industry, the Liberal government would be talking about it every day. They'd be like, look, 10,000 people just got hired in our green, but there's not. They've been at it 12 years now. And there's no progress. All that's happened is Canada has become extremely poor as a result. We have gone into heavy debt as a result that is going to be put on our great-grandchildren to be paying back. There's no way in the world that this green agenda is working, because if it were working, the Liberal government would be talking about it. But they're not talking about it because there are no jobs. Stats Canada would be talking about how these jobs have happened. They break down where all the jobs are being hired. They break it down. And there's none being made in these quote unquote new industries, because anybody who's in the industry is taking their product or their business down to the United States or to other jurisdictions where they don't have to face these kinds of regulations. And we come back to Pierre Poilievre saying we got to get rid of the regulations. We need government to get out of the way so that we can make money and start to become a society of people that have jobs and a future and good prosperity and inexpensive food and inexpensive houses. And the Conservatives and people like myself were trying to explain to you how that's what's best. Right now, it's best to get the industry up and running, and then we can find out better ways to keep it clean. I mean, there was a time in the 50s when it looked like China in downtown New York. The smoke was just blown into the air. But we figured out a way to make it clean. We figured out a way to make the water clean. We figured out a way. By having the industry there, we figured out how to solve the problem because the industry paid for it. If the industry is gone, there's no way to pay for it. And we have very narrow-minded individuals who think they know more than everybody else and who are terrified to try anything that might make their ideology look like it doesn't have a leg to stand on. So we have now this conundrum where the Liberal government is trying to claim that what Donald Trump is doing is wrong, but when they do it, it's going to be right. And somehow in the middle of all that, they want you to believe that if you just hold on for 5, 10, 15 more years, they might be able to solve the problem. Don't worry about it, guys. It's all under control. MP Anand and MP Joly got it all worked out. Do you feel inspired? Are you able to relax? Let me know down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.